Hello and welcome to another native DNA video on population genetics. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Navajo population of Arizona. I have gone ahead and reverse entered the Navajo's 15 allelic frequencies, 15 STR loci from the Ancestry et al. 2016 DNA study, in which about 30 Native American populations from across the United States were studied, with one of them being the Navajo. So I've gone ahead and I've entered in 2 alleles for each loci, which you can see here. Here's the list of loci, and here is each pair of alleles per locus. So we're going to hit Find Ancestry and see what turns up. So we can see, this is very interesting. We can see, of course, that the Navajo population, both of them, there have been 2 different studies done. This is the Ancestry et al. 2016 study, and this is another study conducted by the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, I believe back in 2008, and it was amended back in 2015. So that study obviously is number 2. The Apache are number 3. Keep in mind that the Navajo and Apache people are, their languages originate from the Athabascan language family, whose root is Western Canada. And there's an important reason to keep that in mind. We're going to discuss it more in just one second, but I'll continue to go down this list of the Navajo's most highest results. So the Apache and the Yavapai combined population, composite population, is there, and then the Yavapai Arizona from southwestern Arizona in the vicinity of Yuma, there in southwestern Arizona. So we can see that, and then we have Athabascan speakers, another Apache population thrown in there. What I really want to focus on today are some interesting results that have to do with the geographical location, proximity of the Navajo people to Mexico, even though that their language is rooted in Western Canada. The Athabascan language family is rooted in Western Canada, and so you would expect, perhaps, using the anthropology, language, family, and DNA, when trying to determine certain tribes' origins or certain people's origins, that the language would potentially indicate more so of where their DNA originated. And you can see right here, it really doesn't. We don't really see any Canadian tribes in the top 10. Nothing really to speak of. There's Salish here, but that is appearing for a different reason that we'll touch on in a moment. Specifically, what I was thinking might pop up would be Dog Rib from Western Canada, from Yukon Territories, Northwest Canada. And the reason I was expecting that is because they are a part of that Athabascan language family. And so I was thinking that they would be more tied to the Navajo than some of these Mexican Native American populations would be, just because of their geographic proximity, or excuse me, just because of their language family orientation being tied to Western Canada. But instead what we're seeing is these Mexican Native American populations extending much higher because of the geographic proximity to the Navajo people. So this Salish result right here, this is an interesting discussion, because I've had quite a few people from the southeastern United States contacting me, wondering why are my results showing Salish Native American from the northwest coast, British Columbia. And there's also a Montana Salish population, but we'll talk about that later. Pretty similar DNA, but anyway. So the main reason here is, I wanted to mention this, is that the Salish have a strong affinity to Mexico. Oftentimes you'll see this Salishan Native American pop up for people who have a strong Native American component contributed from Mexico. So what this means is, when the ancestors of the Salish people kept moving down the western coast of the United States, down into Mexico, their genome was combined with Mexican Native Americans, and so as a result, modern day Salish are related to Mexicans, but they do not have a Mexican ancestry in them. So the Mexicans have Salish ancestry, but the Salish do not have Mexican ancestry because they kept going further south with time, in the antiquated time, the old times, right? Long time ago, thousands of years. And so they picked up the Mexican Native American ancestry as they were heading south, but obviously none really returned back to northwest Canada or to BC, British Columbia. So the Salish don't have Mexican ancestry, but the Mexicans have Salish ancestry. And so that's why a lot of people from the southeast will see this contribution, the Salish contribution to their genome, because the southeastern United States Native Americans have a significant Mexican component going back to the Mississippian period. So I know that's a mouthful, but it's fascinating, folks. It really is to see how all this has played out. And it's evident right here in our DNA calculator here on Native DNA. So going down, we see more Mexican contributions. You can see just how strong the Navajo people here are related to some of these Mexican populations. The Cora from Nayarit, Mexico right here. The Aymara and Mestizo population from La Paz, Bolivia. Now, this is something else that's fascinating. The Aymara population being from Bolivia, very old population. I believe I have read that they are actually considered older than the Incan civilization. I could be wrong about that, but I believe the Quechua are the modern day descendants of the Incan civilization, the Quechua from Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. However, I believe the Aymara are older. And somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong, and please do, but I believe I've seen that jotted down somewhere. So anyway, back to the core of the discussion here. The Aymara people match the Navajo pretty high. And so do the Choctaw from Mississippi. If you go back and you'll watch the video that I did on the Choctaw people, the Aymara people have a genetic link to the Choctaw, but even stronger is the Navajo. That video that we did shows that the highest, greatest contribution of modern day people, or the greatest similarity to modern day Choctaws, are the Navajo. Out of the 1,125 populations that we have today in our database here at Native DNA, the strongest living relatives, closest living relatives to the Choctaw, are the Navajo. And that can go into a whole nother discussion, but I think it's interesting that the Navajo are related to the Aymara, and so are the Choctaw. So there's some connection going on there that's pretty fascinating. And then we go on down the list, and you see Nayarit, Mexico, Tepehuano from Durango, Mexico, Mestizo from Huancayo, Peru, and then another Salish population. Isn't that interesting? Going back to our prior discussion. The Tarahumara, the runner people of Mexico. These are some of the longest distance running people in the world. They run barefoot. It's fascinating. If you've never researched the Tarahumara and you're fascinated by population genetics, go and read about these people. They're amazing. And there's Bolivia, and we'll scroll on down. But the key takeaway here, folks, the crux of the message is you don't see a lot of Western Canada in there, do you? You don't really see a dog rib population until we get way on down here. I believe it is somewhere in the neighborhood of, let me find it for you because I know it's here. Here it is, 463. So 50, how many populations is that from the top? 57? Yes, 57 populations from the top. So the 57th population down from the top is dog rib. So that's way on down there. Really far down there, especially when you look at the strength of matches of some of these other peoples here. The Cora of Mexico, Salish, Tepehuano from Durango. So this is telling us that despite the Navajo having an Athabascan language root, that their DNA is much more similar to Mexican Native Americans. Fascinating. This is run at 17 STRs. Let's poke on over here and go to our 30 STR calculator, run at 21 STRs for the Navajo, because that's all we have from the population study from Canthaswamy et al. 2016. You can see very similar. The Yavapai matched them the most closest. And then going on down through, you have Yavapai mixed with European, some Navajo, and Mayan, Native American, Mexico. Isn't that something? So instead of finding the Athabascan language would be maybe related to possibly the Cree of Saskatchewan, maybe the Inupiat or the Yupik of Alaska, maybe even going back into eastern Siberia. You would think they'd be related more to those people than to Mexicans, but because of their geographic proximity, we see lots of Mexican Native American populations. The Nahuatl Tocpan here, general American Indian population, which is very heavily slanted, this one in Pima and Maya. This one right here is. Going down, we see various other populations, but that's the takeaway message, and I just wanted to share this with you today. It's pretty fascinating, and thanks for tuning in and watching. I'm going to do some more videos here soon discussing a lexicon or a glossary of terms about how population geneticists go about researching your ancestry, like when you take a DNA test and things like that, especially pertaining to the STR DNA markers. And how we go about finding our ancestry via those. So stay tuned for that, and I hope y'all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.